What if I told you there is a product you've been buying your entire life without even realizing it? Have you ever thought that something could make money without producing anything tangible at all? A product so invisible that most people don't even realize they are buying it every single day. That product is debt. And debt is far from innocent. It has been deliberately built into the most profitable product in human history. It has funded wars, collapsed empires, made countries dependent, and slowly transferred the wealth of ordinary people upward. But if you ask most people today, where did debt come from? Who designed this system? Why is it everywhere? Very few could give you a clear answer, because the history of debt is not just about economics. It is directly about money and power. At its simplest, debt is a promise. You say, "I'll take it today and pay tomorrow." But hidden inside that promise is something critical: interest. Interest means turning your future life into profit. People in the past understood how dangerous this was. In ancient Mesopotamia, debts were written on clay tablets, but they were also regularly erased, because rulers knew one thing. If the population becomes too trapped in debt, society collapses. The same idea appears in sacred texts. Every 50 years, debts were meant to be forgiven. In other words, ancient societies understood this. If debt is not controlled, it enslaves people. But over time, the wealthy and powerful learned something else. Instead of erasing debt, it was far more profitable to use it as a weapon. In the Middle Ages, the church officially banned interest, but bankers found ways around it. They disguised loans as trade agreements or created complex contracts no one could really understand. Then during the Renaissance, banking families like the Medici rose to power. Without conquering land or raising armies, simply by lending money, they gained enormous influence. They financed kings, popes, and merchants, and in return they collected not just money, but political power. Debt was no longer just a financial tool. It had become power itself. The biggest change came with state debt. When the Netherlands was fighting Spain, it sold bonds to its own people. Citizens lent money to the state and received interest in return, and those debts could even be traded like property. War was no longer limited by the gold in the king's treasury. The future itself was being sold to finance it. England copied the system and expanded it. In 1694, the Bank of England was created and state debt became permanent. Governments no longer borrowed only in emergencies. They became systems that lived on debt. And the bankers managing that debt became indispensable to kings. Was it profitable? Extremely. Lending to governments became the safest investment in the world because it was paid back through taxes. The longer wars lasted and the more debt grew, the richer the creditors became. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and debt entered everyday life. Factories were built with loans, workers were paid by debt-financed companies, and then those same workers borrowed to buy homes, furniture, and basic needs. At some point, debt became normal. Mortgages, car loans, credit cards, student loans. It was presented as a natural part of life. Buy now, pay later. Enjoy today, we'll worry about tomorrow. But here is the clever part. Debt doesn't make money just once. Every month, every year, every interest payment, small but constant streams of money flow upward. When you buy a house, you often pay 2 or 3 times its price. Credit card debt grows the longer it rolls over. And what starts as a small help can slowly become a trap. Debt turned into the most successful business model in history. No factories, no products, no raw materials, just time, converted into money. Then the system went global. The IMF, the World Bank, international loans. Countries borrowed money, but they no longer decided their own policies. Budgets, cuts, privatizations were dictated from the outside. Debt was no longer just financial. It became a tool of political control. At the same time, debt fully entered personal life. Owning a home looked possible, but only through decades of payments. Cars, furniture, even vacations were sold on credit. The entire system began to run on borrowing. Then came 2008. A system built on debt collapsed. Banks were about to fail. And who saved them? The public. And what happened next? The same banks became even bigger. The debt system continued. It expanded even more. Today, global debt has passed $300 trillion, and we still call this growth. Young people study with loans, and we call it investment. Families take on 30-year mortgages, and we call it a dream. Governments borrow constantly, and no one seems surprised. It is presented as normal. But in reality, every interest payment is a transfer of wealth from bottom to top. Over time, that gap becomes permanent. Those with assets borrow cheaply and grow richer. Those without assets borrow expensively and stay trapped. Debt becomes a class divider, and now digital currencies are being discussed. Programmable, traceable, controllable money. Algorithms deciding who gets credit and who doesn't. It is sold as efficiency. But history always shows the same thing. What is convenient for creditors means less freedom for debtors. So the truth is this. Debt is not democratic. It is not innocent. This system was built this way on purpose. Financial freedom will not be given to you by the system because the system profits from keeping you in debt. Real power is needing less debt. Questioning easy money promises. Knowing that behind every offer is someone profiting from your future. History may change its appearance, but the pattern stays the same. Debt empowers creditors, exhausts debtors, and shapes the world in favor of those who control money. And the cruelest trick of all is this. They teach us to see this as progress. They teach us to confuse debt with prosperity. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. Because history has a lot to say. And we can learn where to look and where to begin together.